What if I told you that the modern cure for a deadly, invisible disease currently hiding in millions of people is, well, literal medieval bloodletting?
Yeah, it sounds almost like science fiction, honestly. But this is a very real, very dangerous biological collision happening inside human bodies right now.
Right, and today we're looking at this medical paradox in our deep dive into Dr. Daniel Wallerstorfer's really fascinating book, Unlock Your Genes for Precision Health. Specifically, we're pulling from the Nova Daily Genetics series.
Exactly. We're exploring this genetic survival mechanism, something that literally saved human lives about 6,000 years ago, but has somehow morphed into a silent killer today.
Which is wild. And, if you're listening to this and you have any degree of Northern European or Irish ancestry, your ears should really perk up right now.
Oh, absolutely. The genetic math we're going to unpack today might be quietly influencing your own health, and it's dictated entirely by the ghosts of your ancient ancestors.
But a 6,000-year-old genetic quirk doesn't just stay in the history books, right? It collides with real people. Which brings us to Jim.
Yeah, Jim O'Malley. His life is just such a profound, heartbreaking illustration of this whole condition.
He was a homicide detective from Pittsburgh, right?
He was, and he was a man deeply and proudly rooted in his heritage. He grew up near Pittsburgh, one of 8 sons, born to an Irish railroad worker.
8 sons, wow.
Yeah, big family.
Right.
And his roots were so physically apparent that as a kid, everyone just called him Red because of his vivid, bright red hair.
And his life story is incredibly cinematic, too. I mean, he started out serving in the U.S. Army, then he followed his brother into the police academy.
Right, and ultimately spent 14 years as a homicide detective for the Pittsburgh Police Department.
He was part of this legendary detective duo, wasn't he?
Yeah, he and his 2 partners used to joke that they were Smith and Wesson, just like the firearms.
That's amazing.
He was just a truly formidable presence. I mean, over his career, he investigated nearly 700 homicides.
700, jeez.
And he had this extraordinary capacity for navigating these high-stakes life-or-death situations. There is this one specific incident that his former boss shared.
Oh, the hospital story.
Exactly. There was a hysterical, heavily armed man holed up inside a hospital. And Jim didn't, call in a massive tactical SWAT team.
He just went in himself.
He simply walked up to the armed man, slowly and calmly, started talking to him, and eventually got the guy to break down in tears and hand over his weapon.
Wow. There's just a brutal irony here, though. He spent 14 years successfully talking down armed, dangerous people he could see.
Right.
He investigated hundreds of murders. But the thing that finally took him down was an invisible biological weapon that had been sitting quietly in his cells since the day he was born.
That is the tragedy of it, really. At age 53, a completely different kind of fight began for Jim.
What happened?
Well, his joints suddenly began to ache with this intense, unexplainable pain. And he started getting sick constantly, like his immune system was seemingly failing him.
Just out of nowhere.
Pretty much. And the condition kept progressing, relentless and slow, until the pain seeped deep into his bones. Eventually, his pancreas began to fail, and he developed diabetes.
And he lived in this state of physical agony for, 15 excruciating years before any doctor could finally give him the correct diagnosis?
15 years, yes. He was finally told he was suffering from hemochromatosis. It's a condition that Sandra Thomas, the former head of the American Hemochromatosis Association, coined the Celtic curse.
The Celtic curse? But by the time Jim finally received that diagnosis, wasn't it too late?
Sadly, yes. The severe physical damage to his organs was completely irreversible. 4 years later, Jim O'Malley died of heart failure.
So he was basically killed by a poison of his own body's making.
Exactly. Fueled by a genetic defect that hitched a ride with the exact same genes responsible for his vivid red hair.
It's incredibly tragic. It sounds like Jim was dealing with a slow-moving poison where the weapon was hidden in plain sight. Or in this case, woven deep inside his own Irish heritage.
That's a very accurate way to put it.
But why exactly would his ancestry hold a murder weapon in the first place?
Right. To answer that, we have to step out of modern-day Pittsburgh and travel roughly 20,000 years back in time to the Stone Age.
Okay, let's do it.
We need to look at the ancestors of modern Caucasians back when they were European hunters and gatherers. Their environment and their daily survival dictated everything about their genetics.
Let's paint a picture of that environment for the listener. What are they eating 20,000 years ago?
Well, we can actually look at indigenous hunter-gatherer tribes today, like in the Amazon, to understand it. Back then, early Caucasian ancestors consumed a diet that was about 65% iron-rich animal foods and only 35% plant-based foods.
That is a lot of meat.
A massive amount. They were taking in massive, massive amounts of dietary iron every single day.
But the human body doesn't actually need that much iron to function, right? So how did they not just overdose on it constantly?
Evolution provided a brilliantly simple regulatory valve. They possessed what we'll call the Hunter HFE gene.
The Hunter HFE gene.
This original version of the gene was programmed to be highly restrictive. It instructed the intestines to absorb only about 10% of the iron from all that meat into the bloodstream.
And the rest of it.
The remaining 90% safely passed right through the digestive system and ended up in the toilet. It was a perfect biological filter.
Oh, wow. So it keeps the body balanced. But of course, human culture doesn't stay stagnant. Eventually, we stopped spending all our time hunting and we started farming.
And that cultural shift toward agriculture completely flipped their diet upside down.
Because they're eating mostly crops now.
Right. Instead of 65% animal food, their diet dropped to only 35% animal food. Suddenly, these early humans were relying on a largely plant-based diet.
Which means their daily iron intake was slashed in half almost overnight.
Exactly.
I can see the biological car crash coming here. The diet changed radically, but genetic evolution moves at a glacial pace. The genes didn't get the memo.
They absolutely did not get the memo. That Hunter HFE gene was completely blind to the agricultural revolution. It just blindly continued doing exactly what it was programmed to do.
Which was absorbing a mere 10% of the iron coming in.
Yes, but 10% of a low-iron plant-based diet was nowhere near enough to sustain a human body.
So humanity is suddenly starving for iron.
They were plunged into a massive, widespread crisis of iron deficiency. And, in the harsh reality of the ancient world, iron deficiency was a devastating vulnerability.
How bad are we talking?
It led to severely reduced fertility, lower survival rates if someone lost blood from a physical injury or childbirth, and just a general collapse in overall health. The population was weakening.
Until about 6,000 years ago, somewhere in the region of modern-day Ireland.
Right. In just one single individual, a genetic spelling mistake occurred in their HFE gene.
A mutation.
Exactly. Normally, genetic mutations or defects destroy a gene's function, which in this context would have been instantly fatal. But this specific spelling mistake did something entirely different.
What did it do?
It didn't break the gene. It made it twice as active.
Wait, let me unpack this. So this spelling mistake, this defect, was actually an evolutionary superpower back then. It acted like a critical software update to save early farmers.
It was the ultimate biological rescue mission. This new, mutated version, the farmer HFE gene, began instructing the intestine to absorb 20% of dietary iron instead of 10%.
Oh, I see. Because the sheer volume of iron in their food had halved.
Yes. So this gene defect doubling the uptake meant their iron levels were instantly brought right back to an optimal, healthy baseline. The iron deficiency crisis was entirely solved for anyone carrying this new genetic variant.
That is just amazing to think about. One random mutation in one person in Ireland suddenly fixes a population-wide crisis.
Yes, incredible.
And obviously, because this made them healthier, more fertile, and vastly more likely to survive blood loss, it gave them a massive evolutionary advantage.
The huge advantage. Ancient Celtic warriors carried this new genetic trait with them as they expanded their territories and moved across Europe around 800 BC.
Taking the superpower with them.
Spreading it far and wide. People who carried a mix inheriting one original Hunter HSE gene and one new farmer HFE gene thrived in this agricultural world.
Okay, but this brings us to the core mystery of the deep dive. If this farmer HFE gene was this incredible, life-saving evolutionary superpower spread by ancient Celtic warriors, how does it fast forward to becoming the curse that killed Jim O'Malley?
The answer lies in the modern supermarket.
The supermarket.
Just as the shift from hunting to farming broke the first delicate genetic balance, our shift from early farming to the limitless food supply of the modern world broke the second one.
Oh, because of how much we eat now.
Exactly. Today, we have constant, unprecedented access to a huge variety of both plant and animal foods. Our average dietary iron intake has skyrocketed right back up to those ancient heavy levels.
So we are walking around eating like ancient hunters, but we're doing it with the upgraded genetics of the ancient farmers.
It is a recipe for biological overload.
Yeah.
Remember, everyone inherits 2 HFE genes, one from each parent. If you inherit one hunter gene and one farmer gene, you are generally fine. That combination still protects against deficiency, but doesn't cause major problems with a modern high-iron diet.
But what if you get 2 of the same?
Well, the issue is that the farmer HFE gene has become so incredibly common over the millennia that frequently two healthy carrier parents will both pass down the defective farmer HFE gene to their child.
Which means the child inherits two supercharged 20% absorbing farmer genes, just like Jim did.
Just like Jim. And here is the crucial, terrifying biological fact that turns this modern collision lethal. The human body has absolutely no excretory mechanism for iron.
Wait, none at all?
None. You cannot sweat it out, you cannot breathe it out, you cannot excrete it in your urine. Once iron enters the bloodstream, it is locked inside the body.
Wow. Since the body has absolutely zero way to get rid of this excess iron, it's basically a physiological hoarding mechanism that never shuts off?
Physiological hoarding perfectly captures the danger. If you have two of these farmer HFE genes, your body is aggressively pulling 20% of the iron from an already iron-heavy modern diet every single day, year after year, decade after decade.
And because it can't throw the iron away?
It just starts packing it into your major organs.
Walk us through what that physiological hoarding actually looks like as a timeline. How does it physically destroy a person over time?
It is a terrifyingly silent progression, largely because the body is remarkably good at hiding the excess at first.
So you don't even know what's happening?
No, for decades. Usually the first 30 to 40 years of a person's life, they're completely symptom-free. The iron is just quietly accumulating in the tissues. But eventually, the storage limits are breached. The body literally runs out of safe places to put it.
And that's when the cascade of symptoms begins, right?
Right. First, the iron starts depositing directly into the joints. This causes severe, unexplained pain and triggers the onset of rheumatoid arthritis.
Like what Jim had.
Exactly. And as the hoarding continues, the heavy metal begins to compromise the immune system, leading to constant sickness and a debilitating chronic fatigue. Then, the iron attacks the structural integrity of the bones, causing osteoporosis.
It's literally breaking down the body's infrastructure, and then it goes after the organs.
It attacks the pancreas next, destroying its ability to regulate blood sugar, which causes type 2 diabetes.
This is just awful.
And there is also a really chilling physical manifestation of this hoarding. The source material notes that eventually, so much iron is stored in the superficial tissues that the skin literally takes on a reddish or rusty appearance.
Rusty. Wow.
Yeah. Historically, because of the combination of pancreatic damage and this skin discoloration, doctors referred to this stage of the disease as bronze diabetes.
So it's essentially rusting from the inside out.
It is chronic iron poisoning. Finally, the massive amounts of heavy metal begin scarring the liver tissue, leading to cirrhosis and frequently liver tumors. Ultimately, if it remains untreated, the sheer toxicity causes the patient to die from liver or heart failure.
Which is the exact progression that killed Jim O'Malley.
Unfortunately, yes.
Given how horrific and systematic this progression is, I mean, the arthritis, the diabetes, the visible changes to the skin, the liver damage, why on earth did it take doctors 15 years to figure out what was wrong with Jim?
It points to a massive systemic failure in how modern medicine diagnoses this specific issue. Let's look at the sheer scale of the numbers. Hemochromatosis affects an astonishing 1 in 160 Caucasians.
1 in 160, that's really high.
It is one of the most common genetic metabolic diseases in the entire world, and yet an unbelievable 76% of all cases remain completely undetected and untreated.
76% of cases are just missed. Being accused of being a secret alcoholic when you actually have a genetic disorder is... Wait, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. Is it only Caucasians who are at risk?
The prevalence is entirely dictated by that single ancient mutation in Ireland. Think of Ireland as the epicenter of a genetic earthquake.
Okay, I can picture that.
The source data shows that 25% of the Irish population, 1 in 4 people, carry the defect. As you ripple outward geographically, the numbers steadily drop.
Like shockwaves.
Exactly. 9% of Finns carry it. In Britain, England, and Spain, it's 8%. Italy is at 6%. In Americans, it sits at 3%.
And once you leave the path of those ancient Celtic expansions,
it plummets. It drops to 2.2% in Arab populations, a microscopic 0.05% in African populations, and it is 0% practically non-existent in Asian populations. It is a literal genetic map of ancient Caucasian history.
Okay, so if a doctor has a patient with European ancestry sitting in their exam room presenting with these cascading symptoms, why are they consistently missing the diagnosis? You mentioned something earlier about alcoholics.
Yeah, that ties into how they test for it. Doctors fall into the diagnostic trap of serum ferritin testing. To check for iron issues, doctors run a standard blood test to measure serum ferritin levels.
Think of ferritin as the biological Tupperware your body uses to store iron. If doctors look at the blood and see that those Tupperware containers are overflowing, that should be a massive red flag, right?
It should be. And in a patient with the Celtic curse, those levels will indeed be sky high. But here is the catch: elevated serum ferritin levels occur in about 10% of all Northern Europeans anyway.
Oh, really?
Yes, and those high levels are usually caused by completely different, more common lifestyle factors, primarily obesity and alcoholism.
Ah, that is a terrible diagnostic overlap.
It derails the whole investigation. Iron storage disease is only the 10th most common cause of elevated iron levels. So a doctor looks at the blood test, sees the high iron, looks at the statistical probabilities of modern ailments, and routinely misdiagnoses the patient.
And that's where the secret alcoholic thing comes in?
Exactly. Dr. Wallerstorfer's lab regularly hears stories from affected individuals who say their doctors outright accuse them of being secret alcoholics or blame their weight.
Imagine suffering from a genetic disorder that is systematically destroying your organs, and your doctor dismisses you as a secret alcoholic. That adds profound insult to injury.
It really does.
But I'm curious about the breakdown. If someone listening inherits two of these defective farmer genes, is it a guaranteed death sentence? Does it affect men and women equally?
It's not a complete guarantee, and there is a very stark, fascinating gender difference in how the disease manifests.
Really? How so?
A man who inherits the two defective genes has an 80% likelihood of developing the disease. But a woman with the same two defective genes has only a 50% likelihood.
That's a huge gap. Why?
And typically, she will only develop it much later in life, usually after menopause.
Wait, why is a woman's risk so much lower, and why is it tied to menopause?
Because of menstruation. Remember the core biological flaw we discussed? The human body has no internal excretory mechanism for iron.
Right, it's locked in.
The only way iron physically leaves the body is through blood loss.
Yeah.
For decades, regular blood loss through menstruation acts as a built-in natural release valve.
Oh, that makes complete biological sense.
Yeah, it temporarily protects women by bleeding out the toxic accumulation before it can damage the organs. Men simply don't have that natural monthly blood loss, so the iron just builds and builds without interruption.
Wow. But thinking back to Jim, 15 years of suffering and misdiagnosis, the sheer financial toll of treating all those cascading symptoms, the medication for the diabetes, the treatments for the arthritis, the interventions for organ failure, that must have been astronomical.
The contrast in the financial data is staggering, actually. Based on Jim's case, 15 years of misdiagnosis and treating those cascading complications cost roughly $1 million.
$1 million.
But if a doctor had recognized the risk and ordered a simple genetic test early on, a test that cost about $200, they could have identified the mutation immediately.
And then what?
Add in a $30 routine blood analysis once a year, and the total cost for those 15 years of monitoring would have been just $650.
$1 million versus $650. That is a breathtaking failure of the modern healthcare system. It's bankrupting people for a disease that shouldn't even be a mystery.
Jim's daughter, Caroline O'Malley, has become a fierce advocate for awareness precisely because of this failure. She emphasizes a point that makes Jim's death even more tragic. As she puts it, this disease is absurdly easy to treat.
Okay, if the body is actively hoarding all this iron in the organs and there is no biological system to excrete it, what is this absurdly easy treatment? How do we actually get the poison out?
We do exactly what the ancient medical world did, though for entirely different reasons. The treatment is phlebotomy.
Wait.
Literal bloodletting.
So the ancient medieval practice of bloodletting, the thing associated with leeches and archaic medicine, is actually the exact literal modern cure for this. That is fascinating.
It is the absolute gold standard. Once a patient is diagnosed with iron overload, they undergo a scheduled phlebotomy every 2 weeks.
How much blood are we talking?
A medical professional removes 1 pint or about half a liter of blood from their body. When your body registers that sudden drop in blood volume, it immediately scrambles to produce new red blood cells to replace what was lost.
And to manufacture those new red blood cells, it requires iron.
Exactly. It is forced to pull iron out of the toxic, overfilled reservoirs hiding inside the liver, the heart, and the pancreas. It essentially forces the body to mine its own toxic stockpile.
That is brilliant. How long does that take?
Depending on how many decades the iron has been accumulating, it could take anywhere from a few months to as long as 8 years of this biweekly bloodletting for the organ iron levels to finally drop back down to a normal, healthy baseline.
And once you force the body to clear out the toxic stockpile, how do you prevent the 20% absorption rate from just filling the organs right back up again?
You transition from treatment to maintenance by becoming a regular blood donor. Donating blood just 4 to 6 times a year is nearly 100% effective as a preventative measure.
Just normal blood donation.
Yeah. And here's the truly incredible part. Despite the high iron content in the donor's body, that donated blood is perfectly safe. It can be given to recipients in need of a transfusion. It's the ultimate medical win-win.
You literally save your own life by donating the very thing that is poisoning you, and in the process, you save someone else's life. But what happens if a patient is diagnosed late? Like with Jim, can getting the iron out actually reverse the organ damage that has already occurred?
Sadly, no. The phlebotomy effectively stops the progression of the disease in its tracks and safely lowers the iron levels. But structural organ damage resulting from years of iron toxicity, like the severe liver cirrhosis or the pancreatic destruction, is almost always irreversible.
Oh, man.
That is why early detection isn't just important, it is absolutely critical.
Which brings us back to the power of that $200 genetic test we mentioned earlier.
All right, Dr. Wallerstorfer highly recommends that anyone of European descent Caucasian individuals should get their HFE gene analyzed. The sooner you know, the better.
Makes sense, especially with those odds.
And to clarify, based on the geographic data we discussed, because the mutation originated in Ireland and is virtually non-existent elsewhere, the source material notes that this specific analysis is not useful for those of African or Asian descent.
But for those it applies to.
For Caucasians, it is a simple, one-time genetic test that could spare you from $1 million in medical misery and literally save your life.
It is deeply humbling to realize how much of our modern health is dictated by the environmental pressures our ancestors faced thousands of years ago. Our genes are essentially historical records.
They really are.
What acted as a miraculous, life-saving software update for an ancient Celtic farmer staring down starvation is now quietly poisoning modern people who just happen to enjoy a nice steak from the local supermarket.
It perfectly illustrates that evolution isn't about creating a flawless, future-proof organism. It's just about finding an immediate, messy solution to an immediate environmental threat. When the environment changes, those ancient solutions can become deadly liabilities overnight.
We started this deep dive talking about how medical diagnoses usually feel so precise, a broken bone on an x-ray, a visible wound. But the tragic story of Jim O'Malley shows us that the most dangerous threats might not be things we catch from the outside, but the ancient survival tools written into our very own DNA, completely invisible to the naked eye. So the next time you're walking through the aisles of a modern supermarket surrounded by an absolute limitless abundance of food, ask yourself this. What other ancient evolutionary superpowers might be hiding in your DNA, just waiting to clash with our 21st century lifestyle?